House music is made with so many amazing sounds, some of them very famous, some of them secret gems, but here are 15 sounds you definitely have to know about. If you've watched some of my older videos, you've probably seen this one coming. We of course have to start with some sounds from the Korg M1. And most famously, it probably has this organ bass sound, which if you play single notes is known from famous riffs like... It's kind of versatile, you can do many things with it. So for example, if we remove a bit of attack and play the sound a bit more sustained and some octaves higher, you will also have a sound that you've probably heard. But fortunately, the sound hasn't only been used in these commercial productions, but also pretty underground stuff back in the days. It's one of these sounds, if you play it right, you can use it for all types of different productions.
I think it's time to make the floor burn.
Which I can't necessarily say about the next sound we're going to take a look at, which also comes from the Korg M1, which is this classic house piano. I feel like it's kind of overused, but it's still a sound to know about. Luckily, if you're still looking for a nice, quirky house piano sound, there's another one that I can recommend that comes from the Yamaha CP-70. And Yamaha actually developed this to kind of try and create an electric piano, which doesn't sound like an electric piano and more like a real piano. They even gave it like the shape of this grand piano thing. I think it was also used in a classic house track I like quite a lot. Let me know in the comments if you remember this riff. So we were talking about an electric piano which kind of tried to sound like a real piano. Luckily, we also have some electric pianos that actually sound like electric pianos. So the two most famous ones that you should probably know about as a house producer are Rhodes, obviously, and Wurlitzer. And there is a plugin which kind of combines both, which is called Lounge Lizard. And it's kind of nice because it combines many different types of electric pianos in one. So you will find anything from like organy sounds to Rhodes sounds, Wurlitzer sounds, and there's some decent processing options in there. So that's kind of cool. But enough about electric pianos. What would house music be without some proper drums? And you probably already know about classic drum machines like the TR-808 or 909, but there are actually some more drum machines also made by Roland that you should definitely know about. I especially like the ones which have some cool percussion sounds in there. For example, the 727, which doesn't only have like nice congas and bongo sounds. I also like the agogo bells and these other Latin percussion sounds. But then you also have the 626, which kind of combines some normal drums with percussion sounds in there, which is pretty nice. Also from Roland comes the 505, which also has some percussion sounds in there, but it has been used quite a lot for acid house. Speaking about acid house, you obviously have to know about Roland's TB-303, which is the small bass synthesizer which has been used to create acid house back in its early days up until now. Kind of a funny story about the 303 is that it was meant to be something completely else. So Roland developed it to be kind of this bass companion for solo musicians or bands who were missing their bass player but wanted to practice. But it was a complete flop because it didn't sound like a real bass sound at all. So Roland even stopped the production. But then, like in the 80s in Chicago, people picked it up to create electronic music. And in retrospect, it was a huge success and left a very important mark on electronic music up until this day. I always like a story where something starts out as a complete fail, but then in retrospect turns out to be a big success. Anyway, one of the reasons the 303 sounds the way that it sounds is because of its filter. Because something that happens when you turn up the resonance, which creates this chirpy acid sound, is that actually all the lower frequencies will be reduced. So you're boosting the resonant frequency, but you get less bass. So this would be with no resonance. We have more bass energy, high resonance. We're actually lowering the bass energy. And if we jump back into the M1, it actually gets visualized quite nicely that if you turn up the resonance, you're putting a lot of focus on the resonant frequency, but then reduce the frequencies below it. If we take a look at Ableton's autofilter, you will visually see that if you boost the resonance, nothing else happens to the sound. It will actually also result in a different sound. In this case, we have a filter which doesn't lower the lower frequencies if we boost the resonance. And this actually will create a sound which is more like a Foreman filter somehow. So listen to that. So that's also a sound that you should know about. You know it from like people like you and Evan and stuff. This more like formal T filter stuff. While for acid, you might want to have something that puts focus on the resonance and lowers the other stuff. If you now use a synth plugin like Diva, for example, this would be the initial preset that it starts out with. You obviously don't have a visual representation of what these different filter types that it has do. They all emulate like a specific old classic synthesizer. So you might have to do some research or listen in or use a spectrogram to really see how the different filter types work in order to know what type of sounds you can create with them. The synth technique that doesn't necessarily need any filters is FM synthesis. And a very famous FM sound you should probably know about is the lately bass. It originally comes from the Yamaha TX-81Z, but you can also easily replicate it with a DX7, for example, which is why you will also find it as a preset in many DX7 emulations like this one by Arturia, which has a preset called lately bass. But something that's kind of cool about the lately bass is that you can not only use it as a bass sound, but also as a lead sound. For example, it has been famously used in a track called French Kiss by Little Lewis to create a lead sound kind of like this. Many FM synthesizers also give you basic options to use additive synthesis, which can also be used to create some nice bass sounds like this one. You can of course also make very nice bass sounds using subtractive synthesis. A synthesizer that might come more to mind for its famous pad sounds is a Juno 6, but it can also create some pretty cool bass sounds like the one we were just listening to, kind of sounded like this. For this, you just have to make sure to use the Juno's nice chorus, which you can also find as a free extra plugin made by Tal, and make sure to use enough resonance and a square wave. The square wave of the Juno combined with the chorus sounds pretty nice, but same is true for the saw wave. Something that I like is that you can basically not do anything to the saw wave and just throw a chorus on there, and you already get this very nice classic chord sound. We obviously can't forget about the Mini Moog, which has been used to create so many classic bass sounds, like this type of Moog bass is obviously pretty common, but you can also create sequences to create like bass sequences. And this can also be used to create many cool sounds, especially if you tweak the gate of the sequencer together with the cutoff frequency of the filter. Last but not least, a sound that's always worth having in your repertoire. It's the most simple sound of all, a sine wave. The sine wave can be used as the basis for so many different sounds. Like if you just pitch it down a bunch, you get a very nice, fat and clean sub bass. I mean, you can throw some distortion on there. That way you get a bit more audible sub bass. Also, if you just use a sine wave and play chords, for example, you get almost like an electric piano organ type of sound as a basis. If you adjust the pitch envelope of a sine wave, you can create like kick drums and bass drums, which is pretty cool. And then also, obviously, if you adjust the pitch envelope, you can get some pretty cool effect sounds. All right, these were a few sounds I thought you should definitely know about. Let me know in the comments if I missed any very important ones. Obviously, there are many more sounds worth mentioning, but I just felt like mentioning a few. And I hope to see you in the next one. Ciao.